Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 367 for Monday, September 15th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms and YouTube and Spotify. Get the video version as well. If you're interested in the show and you like what we do here, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to or watching this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixariffs, and joining me, as always, making everybody in the chat hungry, is Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello, it is my special gift. I cook a lot, I talk about food a lot, and you contribute. Like, there was some really pretty pictures of fresh tomatoes from your garden in the pre-show. So for folks that want to get hungry before they watch the Spawn Chunks, then they can check out the render distance. It's the extended version of the podcast, and the video version of the render distance is available to our patrons at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. That's where you can get either the video or the audio version. You can subscribe to the patron-only RSS feed and get that version of the show delivered to your favorite podcasting app. It's an extra 15 to 30 minutes of podcast every single week. There's also extra stuff like the upcoming September 27th Minecraft Hangout, which is where we talk to you about what you've been building or adventuring or doing in Minecraft. Similar to our login here on the show, but we spend some time with our patrons and talk about that kind of stuff. And new this month to the Patreon is the annual subscription. So if you like the show and you've been around for a while and you're thinking, I'd like to just kind of do this 1 year at a time, you can now. It's an option that's available on patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
This week, we're going to be talking about the next installment of Minecraft Live. The date for that has finally been announced, so we get to share that news with our audience. And we're activating the Chunk Mail dispenser for some listener emails about mob vote mobs and a couple of other topics. So looking forward to deep diving the mailbag.
So I don't know about you, but I did not have a chance to do much this week in Minecraft other than take you on a tour of West Hill, finally.
It was great to be hopping onto the server and seeing in person all of the stuff that I've seen screenshots of for a while. And I feel this way about when I've had the opportunity to visit content creators' worlds that I've played with, like the brief time that the Empire's crew spent on the Hermitcraft server last season. It was the same kind of thing where it's so strange seeing it through somebody else's eyes for so long and then being able to like visit and see something with your own eyes. It's sort of like being an armchair tourist for a really long time, or playing GeoGuessr and then actually going to, remote Italian town, that kind of thing. So yeah, West Hill was fantastic. We had a great tour. And right now, the VODs of that are going to be available early for patrons of the Spawn Chunks, and I believe your Patreon audience as well.
Yes, I posted both in the Spawn Chunks Patreon and in my personal Patreon a link to a unlisted YouTube video for both your perspective on the Spawn Chunks YouTube channel and my perspective on I've got it on my YouTube channel, but there's also my perspective on the Spawn Chunks as well, so people aren't missing out. So if you are a member of either one of those Patreon, then you can go and check out the videos early. They will eventually be public because it's been a long time project of mine, and I don't want to have the tour behind Patreon. So they will eventually get out there. But it's another way to say thank you to the people that support me and the people that support us here on the Spawn Chunks. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come through. It was really fun to show you around, especially having talked to you about it so many years here on the podcast. And it's just nice to have a conversation about it from another perspective. So like, I'm in it. Like, I've been just sleeping and breathing this as a personal project for years. And so to have like different thought processes or different questions, or just to see if the level of immersion I was trying to go for worked. And hearing that kind of feedback was really cool. And the stream is like 2.5 hours, and we did not touch on everything. Like,
yeah,
we could not take the time to go inside every single building, because at some point, like, it just starts to look a little bit the same depending on what building you're going inside of. But we popped into the inns, we popped into the flower shop, some of the things that were a little bit more unique. But we didn't touch on things like the barracks, and there's a couple of other houses on the perimeter that we didn't get to. And there's just so much in West Hill that I was surprised that even after almost 3 hours, we didn't get to everything.
Yeah, no, there's obviously going to be a lot of interiors that we can't like dip in and out of constantly, but the fact that all of the interiors are done, like, all of that stuff is so evident from the level of quality you put into that project from start to finish. And yeah, it was a real treat. So eventually those VODs will become public so that folks who aren't subscribed to our Patreon can check them out. And I thoroughly recommend it because it's a really fun opportunity to look around a project that we've been talking about on the podcast for so long, and genuinely such a fantastic build.
And that's all I had time for this week. Like, I have not had a chance to be in Minecraft since. Have you been able to dabble around at all?
I've done a little bit here and there. I'm working on the copper area, the copper aging area underneath the Windy City. So far, not much progress has been made on that beyond just digging out a large area, and the area still needs to expand by like a good few blocks on the y-axis. So that means just clearing out a giant room and then digging the floor out several times. And I'll probably have to dig it out larger than the radius of a beacon can allow, so I'm trying to figure out logistically where I move it to next, how I sort of optimize my time there. But outside of that, I'm aiming to do a couple of small episodes of the Minecraft Survival Guide on some stuff like music discs, because a couple of those got added fairly recently that I haven't even covered yet. And I just built a creeper trap with a skeleton at one end, and I can just kind of funnel creepers in overnight to get music discs sort of one at a time the easy way. I'm maybe planning on building a specialized creeper farm at some stage just for gunpowder, because gunpowder is so useful at endgame, and I've got other sources of bone meal and stuff like that. So a specialized creeper farm that I can then turn into, optionally, a record farm by... there's that method where you can get a skeleton to shoot through lava so it lights a TNT on fire with a burning arrow, and then that can just drop into a room full of creepers, all of which will drop music discs because technically they've been killed by the skeleton.
Cool.
I've seen
Right.
Zedaf did this more recently on the Hermitcraft server, but I've seen the method done in the past, and so I kind of want to do something like that, and I can turn that functionality on and off so that the rest of the time the creepers can just fall onto, soul campfires or whatever and just drop gunpowder like normal, and ideally we'd be able to optimize the creeper output from that. But the other stuff, of course, the stuff that really motivated this was the fact that I didn't have the Tears music disc yet, because I hadn't done the Return to Sender thing on a Ghast since they added that in Chase the Skies. Likewise, the most recent minor update gave us Lava Chicken as well, and I have yet to encounter a chicken jockey in my world. So I'm going to spend a couple of nights just kind of prowling around looking for mobs that have spawned naturally. I've gotten Tears at this point. I have all of the other music discs that you can get from loot chests and the trial vaults and that kind of thing. So there's a few like odds and ends to clear up, and then all of the discs that you could get from creepers, some of which are just dropping duplicates for me at this stage. So I think the mass production, like the mass printing record facility is kind of necessary. But that's the sort of stuff I'm trying to cover in the meantime, while the Copper Age drop is probably only a few weeks away, and I want to save some of the bigger action for that when hopefully people are getting back in and finding out what's new in Minecraft in the new drop.
Yeah, the Copper Age is right in line with the kind of things that you want to do in the Windy City. So I can understand just a lot of planning and kind of holding off until things are final and you know exactly how the copper golems are going to work. And even just like any changes that might happen to copper items that you're going to have access to, that kind of stuff would be worth waiting for. It reminds me of when we knew Deep Slate was coming, and I was waiting for Deep Slate to be part of the foundation of the keep in Westhill, like big key builds and big color shifts that I just did not have access to until that came out. And I just remember thinking like, man, what am I going to do until then? And I just spent a lot of time on the smaller builds. And as a result, it was a little frustrating because like some of the bigger areas in Westhill were kind of on hold, and it felt like you kind of had this incomplete area. So right now with the Windy City, I guess it's so new that it all feels kind of incomplete. You're not at a stage where like you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, no, a lot of it is still very much a work in progress, and I have plans for bigger stuff that's actually going to have more functionality in it. Like the houses I built so far are purely aesthetic at the moment, and I could fill them with different things, interiors, farms, whatever, but I do want to have a dedicated storage system here, and I want to be able to use the copper golems for multi-item sorting and really kind of get down to brass tacks on how that stuff works. So that's the goal right now, is to hang on for the Copper Age and hopefully only have a couple more weeks left to wait on that one. Speaking of which, we can get into the news, the headline of which is, of course, that Minecraft Live has been announced for September 27th, actually the same day as our patron hangout, so our patrons will get to see us earlier in the day, and then later on, Joel and I will be co-streaming from the spawn chunks from our respective Twitch channels. We should be able to both stream it this time around. Normally the stream goes out on my channel, but either way, the VOD will be posted to our YouTube afterwards, so people can check out our first-time reactions to anything that gets announced. The article announcing Minecraft Live was posted on Minecraft.net on September 10th, along with a trailer on YouTube. So the official Minecraft Live trailer for September 2025 is up there as well. And the YouTube announcement trailer heavily features the upcoming Copper Golem, with a nod to a few other features from recent game drops like the Happy Ghast. Both the article and the YouTube video announced that the next Minecraft Live will be on Saturday, September 27th at 7 p.m. Central European Standard Time and 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, so adjust for your time zones accordingly. As usual, we can expect news on previously unannounced game drops, insights from the developers, and the Deep Dig after show with a playtest of upcoming features. This week we also got Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 25W37A, that was published September 9th. Changes in this update: OpenGL 3.3 is now required to play the game, which is up from version 3.2, but this doesn't change the posted minimum requirements. A developer's note explains, "We do not expect the update to OpenGL version to affect many people, if any at all. Our posted minimum requirements has been OpenGL 4.0 since 2017, and OpenGL 3.3 turned 15 years old recently." Minor tweaks to blocks, items, and entities in this update. They fixed a bug where breaking a shelf while another player was interacting with it could lead to some visual bugs in the player's inventory. The Copper Golem's hitbox has once again been tweaked. The hitbox is now 0.49 blocks in width to be able to pathfind through narrow spaces. Copper Golems can now also open doors, so very little will stand in their way at this point. Test instance blocks now preserve error markers between world reloads for anyone using the test environments. Ambient lighting on entities has been adjusted to be more visually in line with blocks and other parts of the game. The underside of flat surfaces will now be lit from that direction instead of the opposite direction. That affects models containing cubes that are either flat or quote-unquote hollow, such as worn armor, worn elytra, the outside layers of player skins, the rib cages of skeletons or skeleton horses, the feet of chickens or frogs, the wings of phantoms or the ender dragon, the fins on fish, and many more. In terms of game mode switching, the switching from spectator mode to creative mode no longer causes the player to stop flying. Instead, flight will now only be disabled when switching game modes if the player is near enough to the ground. A player is considered to be near the ground if there is a collidable surface within a block below them. Flight will not be disabled if the player was inside a block or collidable entity to prevent players from suddenly falling through the ground. In terms of game rules, they've added spawner blocks enabled, which is a game rule that controls whether or not spawner blocks should be enabled or not. It defaults to true, and that will affect whether or not spawners will still produce hostile mobs even if hostile mob natural spawning is switched off. Mob spawning also changed in terms of the equipment they can equip. Logic for choosing the type of equipment for a mob spawning with equipment has been tweaked to add copper as a possibility. The initial roll to choose a type now chooses between leather, copper, and gold, and the chance to increase an armor tier has increased from 9.5 to 10.87. Some sound sliders in the music and sound options now play a preview sound when adjusting the setting outside of a world. The resource pack and data pack selection screens now have their own search box, and there have also been some changes to the Minecraft server management protocol and server properties. They're a little bit crunchy to read along with the news, so we recommend checking out the Minecraft.net changelog for full details, along with the full details of technical changes in 25W37A. The data pack version is now 87, the resource pack version is now 69.0. Some previously hidden debug features have been exposed to players, so that's probably worth checking out if you're somebody who likes to deep dive the code of Minecraft. But in the meantime, fixed bugs in 25W37A include copper golems being unable to pathfind through thinner blocks, shield models clipping through shelves, heads and skulls appearing too high when placed on a shelf, copper golems interacting with chests diagonally through solid blocks, and copper golems being able to open chests that are blocked. There are a variety of other bug fixes as per usual, and a full list can be found in the Minecraft.net article that's linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
I am on board for the hitbox on the Copper Golem being just a little bit smaller because my idea for an under chest golem now seems a little bit more feasible. I haven't tested it yet, but it seems like a really good fix. And I was watching some videos on YouTube, and watching the Copper Golems opening and shutting doors behind them as they went through makes a lot of sense. And really nice that they don't leave them open. because that would obviously be a problem if you were having one go in and out of a house that you were also in at nighttime, that kind of stuff. So you'd be able to have that immersion, but also not have to yell at the copper golem to always shut the door behind them.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like there's precedent for it already because villagers have that behavior, so it seems fairly straightforward to give that to the Copper Golem as well. And I agree. I think when I was first testing the Copper Golem, when they first debuted on Bedrock Edition, before they ever came to Java, I was testing them in a village just because it's an environment that I found close by that I thought, okay, there's going to be chests around here already. I can see which chests they will target, how they'll behave, if they'll go and search for a chest in a different house. And they could walk very easily through open doors at the time. But I did notice them trying to walk around to the back and like interact with the chest through the corner where the wall was and that kind of thing. And so now a few of those sort of fringe cases of interactions that don't feel like they should be physically possible have been ironed out. It makes a lot more sense that the Copper Golem can just kind of let itself into an area where it's been sealed off. Also, that covers copper doors as well, but you can still lock them out with stuff like iron doors and control whether or not those open and close using pressure plates and that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot more freedom for players to mess around with that stuff and still have a Copper Golem feel like it's a helpful, handy helper around your base.
Yeah, I just like the idea of having a copper golem either under a floor of chests interacting with them, or if you're trying to put a copper golem into a system and you're trying to make it compact, or you just don't have the room, you're just trying to keep it tight, then having it walk like underneath a double chest. Like you could have a hopper underneath one end of a double chest, and then copper golem could walk underneath the other half of the double chest and hopefully access it. So that could be really, really interesting to see. In terms of like reducing the amount of walk time that they go between different chests could be fun to mess around with. So I can see some ideas for systems coming out with that kind of stuff. The only other thing that really grabbed me about the notes for the snapshot this week, which I think is a great quality of life change, is the ability to hear feedback in the audio settings when you're changing sliders. So if you're turning mobs up or down or blocks up and down, you'll hear a sample of like what that might actually sound like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's great because a lot of times I've gone in, changed it from like 90% to 60%, gone back in game and gone like, did that change anything? Like I can't really compare. But when you can hear the difference and set it to where you want, I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of sound that is science, but there's a certain amount of it that's also perception and is entirely down to like what the player hears and the sort of mix of sounds that you're interacting with. And so, yeah, it does really help if you have an idea of what the sounds are that you're manipulating in the first place. So yeah, that's really good in terms of quality of life changes. And as usual, the list is sort of narrowing down in terms of what it seems like they have left to add. I'm kind of surprised we aren't seeing pre-releases for the Copper Age already, but it seems likely that it's going to just release after Minecraft Live at this rate. So we'll maybe get pre-releases this week, release candidates in the week leading up to Minecraft Live, and then it could be published on September 30th or maybe just the first week of October. So there's, plenty of room for a couple of minor tweaks left, but I think the Copper Golem is really where players want it to be at this point.
Yeah, I think they're leaving themselves room up to Minecraft Live to either have a date in mind, like if they've got some release candidates and they know that they're ready and they can say, okay, at Minecraft Live we can announce a date, or at Minecraft Live they can just say coming in the next little bit, like coming in the next few weeks or even just later this year, which would technically not be wrong, right? And I think if I recall, that's what they did last year. I don't think the update last year came out before Minecraft Live. I think they announced its final date at Minecraft Live. Certainly they gave it a name at Minecraft Live, but maybe this year the name came out sooner. So either way, I sort of called it last week or 2 weeks ago when I said that Minecraft Live is probably going to be around September 28th, which is what it was on last year. But it was just me remembering the date and thinking that it would make sense to not have it into October, because that then just cuts down the weeks left to the end of the year where they're now trying to push out like a fourth drop. And so it makes sense that it's happening in September. Also, like September is that like all the kids are back to school. You're hanging out with all your friends again after you've been doing your own thing all summer. If there's a new Minecraft thing happening, then it's going to be like, for the lack of a better term, like the water cooler talk around the playground is going to be about Minecraft Live and what's happening with Minecraft for the kids that are into it. So I think it's a better timing for Minecraft Live than later in the fall.
Definitely agree. Yeah, I think it's going to mean that the fourth game drop of the year is probably going to be out mid-December. I think that's what happened with Garden Awakens last year. So, I mean, I wouldn't expect anything massive, but presumably with the pace of development right now, they've also been working on these features behind the scenes just to have them ready to playtest within the next few weeks. So, like, in terms of the size of the features, we can only speculate, which I imagine we'll probably end up doing on next week's show in our main discussion, so maybe stay tuned for that. But, yeah, the pace of development seems pretty consistent lately, so maybe if people want to email into the show, maybe speculate about what small gameplay drop features you can see coming to Minecraft with the final gameplay drop of the year. Maybe don't write in if you're expecting an end update, because I've seen so many comments from people at this point becoming just a giant community meme about an end update. So yeah, I imagine there's probably a couple of other small things on the radar. In fact, we're going to get into some of those in the chunk mail for this week. This is going to be a chunk mail focused episode, but we have a bunch of email in the inbox that is related to discussion of previous mob vote candidates and bits and pieces like that. So we thought we'd pick out a few of those as a loose theme for this week's email. And of course, if you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please use that email address regardless of any others you heard on previous episodes of the show. That's the one we use now. Keep them short and sweet if you can. It really does help us include them in the show more easily. But Joel is going to read us this first one.
From Thor of Asgard. I feel honored to have Thor of Asgard writing the show. This is to us about the Moobloom. Hi, Joel and Pix. I was just catching up on one of your recent episodes of the podcast. An idea popped in my head. What if the Moonbloom was added with the additional functionality of dispersing flowers? Using bone meal on a Moonbloom, like when you use bone meal on a regular grass block, but only spreading flowers, or perhaps just wildflowers and pink petals. The argument being that the cow dung would be the perfect fertilizer for flowers on the Moobloom to spread around. Love the show. Thor of Asgard dozed off in a foul-smelling field of flowers.
Yes, it's as usual. It's a good thing they haven't added smell to Minecraft lately, because it would make your cow farm very, very different. But yeah, I think for whatever reason, even though it became one of the lowest voted mobs at the time, the Moobloom really seems to have stuck in certain readers' imaginations, certain players' imaginations, and I genuinely don't know why that is, beyond just people like cute stuff. And I guess some of the recent additions, like I'd say the copper golems have a certain cuteness to them, just in terms of like their size and the animation and stuff. So I think people have maybe clung to the Moobloom as just an idea that extends this kind of cartoony vibe that Minecraft seems to be playing to a little bit more lately. It certainly feels a little bit of a safer option than some of the hostile mobs they've suggested in the past, like the Iceologer.
Yeah, I mean, bone meal giving Moobloom's flower farts is a pretty fun idea. Like that's
Sure.
It's cute. Like there's some whimsy to it. I mean, you'd have to call them poo blooms, maybe. I don't know. We could have some fun.
Not the
with
poo
this.
bloom, Joel. No.
I mean, you have to have something there to appease the fart humor in all of us. Maybe I've been playing too much Borderlands. I think the idea of spreading flowers is cool. Unfortunately, there's already ways to get wildflowers and pink petals. You just bone meal them. Like they already kind of give you more of them in the same way that the two tall flowers give you more of them when you bone meal. I find it frustrating when I'm trying to get more flowers that it's random. Like you have to go to a certain biome. You're only going to get a certain number of flowers. You are going to have to deal with grass and seeds and other things as well. And so I think that's the tricky part. I do like the idea of the Moobloom filtering, so like only giving you flowers, but I feel like it would be better if it gave you like a new flower, like something different than what you already have, because otherwise you're just going to end up with more RNG, and that to me is not quite as fun. I could see maybe like if you took it to a specific biome and you'd be guaranteed to get a flower, like maybe like a lily of the valley, if you took it to a specific biome, because otherwise, if it's just going to be random, then it's not going to really entice much more gameplay than find a renewable bone meal source, which is not too difficult to do, and then just basically spam a Moobloom or multiple Moonblooms in an area, and then just get over the randomness by just pure volume. of stuff, right? And just like turf the stuff that you don't need, because if you're getting too many poppies or too many dandelions, as we know we probably would, then you just turn those into extra bone meal and kind of go from there. So I feel like it would be more interesting to have it be more specific than just another way to get flowers that we can already get in Minecraft.
Yeah, it's tricky, and there have been several new flowers since the Moo Bloom was featured in the mob vote. I took a quick stroll through the Minecraft wiki earlier to look up this, because the Moo Bloom was featured in the mob vote at Minecraft Live 2020. It was obviously like featured in Minecraft Earth before that. But then Pink Petals, the Torch Flower, and the Pitcher Plant were all added in Trails and Tales 1.20. And at Minecraft Live 2020, they were still talking about the Caves and Cliffs update. I think that was when it was initially announced. But since then, yeah, we have Pink Petals, Torchflower, Pitcher Plant, Eye Blossoms, which came in The Garden Awakens, and then Wildflowers and Cactus Flowers in Spring to Life, which was only the update after Garden Awakens. And that's to say nothing of the other stuff that update added, which was, leaf litter, dry grass, bushes, that kind of thing, firefly bushes as well. And so it seems like there are ways of adding new flowers to the game and biomes and ways that they have breathed new life into pre-existing regions of Minecraft without needing to install a mob that was just sort of a mobile way of doing stuff like that. So I was wondering if the Moo Bloom had some other functionality besides just propagating flowers. And it's maybe a little bit of a stretch, because there are flower forests in the game already, and I was wondering if they could maybe be used to create a flower forest style environment where there wasn't one before. I don't necessarily mean like grow all of the trees and stuff as well, but the way flower forests work, they have a specific programmed in pattern of which blocks will generate which flower when bone mealed, and it's not necessarily the flowers that you see on the surface when you arrive there. Like, the pattern changes the second time you bone meal those blocks, but then it sort of stays in the same pattern, and that's why flower farms there can be guaranteed to get you specific varieties. And so I wonder if maybe if they don't necessarily even change the biome, they at least, whenever they're bone mealed or fed or whatever, Moo Blooms could potentially give an area outside of a flower forest biome something like the same properties. They could be, fed something special, like feed you a certain type of flower, and then it generates a pattern that includes those flowers, or something along those lines, where you could guarantee that you get specific flowers within a certain space on a plains biome, or, even in sort of strange and esoteric places, like if you created an artificial island in an ocean, and I'm pretty sure oceans don't spawn flowers at all, but if you brought a Moo Bloom there, you could propagate flowers throughout that area, and it would fix some of the things about that biome that don't occur naturally with the player just spamming bone meal everywhere. That's sort of like what I have for the Moo Bloom in terms of making it more interesting, because as of the Minecraft Live vote, the suggested sort of functionality of them was just that they occasionally propagate dandelions, which are in basically every Minecraft biome that can grow flowers in the first place, and also that they had some sort of vague interaction with bees that they hadn't figured out yet. I sort of wonder if Moo Blooms could be in some way the equivalent of mushrooms, which are native to mushroom islands. You get them sort of only spawning on mycelium blocks. I sort of wonder if the Moo Bloom likes to bring its environment with it, and therefore could be used to create something of the flower forest outside of the flower forest biome.
I kind of like that idea, similar to how when you grow a double spruce tree, you get podzol. And I like the idea of like the Moo Bloom. Maybe there's a new kind of grass. Like maybe there's a new kind of something that spreads from the Moo Bloom. So like if you wanted to bring it somewhere and have it kind of spread stuff around, similar to how moss will spread to grass and dirt and things like that, and stone if it's bone meal. Like you could do something similar with that. When I first read your comment in the notes, I was like, I don't know if I want more birch trees, because that's typically what I see in flower forests is more birch trees, and like I don't really use birch for much, so like I don't know if I want more of that. But the idea of a mob growing trees in Minecraft is interesting to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
that wouldn't be my tree of choice, but that's an interesting idea to have a mob basically going around, sort of like that nymph from Fantasia 2000 that just like flies through the forest and just
Yeah.
green and flowers and plants and trees just kind of flow wherever she flies. Like that kind of stuff is really cool, and I think Minecraft lends itself to that. You know, the fantasy element, the medieval side of things, the magic that's in Minecraft all kind of goes that way. So the Moo Bloom, I mean, already it's a made up mob, like it's not a real thing. So to have it have some sort of magical power or ability, I think would be great. I think that certainly makes it better than just like a dandelion farm, which is what we got from the little video that they showed us. I don't know what they could do with bees outside of like, it could be a fun way to get more bees. Like if you found a Moo Bloom, but you haven't yet found a bee's nest, like having a Moo Bloom spawn a bee's nest or attract bees somehow could be interesting. Um, I always think about the Wuzzles. It's an old 80s cartoon from when I was a kid. And they were basically a bunch of like crossbreed animals like Bumble Lion, and there was an elephant uh butterfly, I want to say. There's a bunch of different animal crosses, and they were just cute little animals, and I could see Minecraft having some fun with that. Like, I mean, maybe the Moo Bloom ends up being something that can fly, you know, like that could be really interesting. You know, like instead of having little bees the size of footballs, maybe we have little calves the size of footballs flying around on butterfly wings. Like there could be some really fun stuff that you could do with something as cute and as wholesome as the Moo Bloom.
And getting into the bee nests and producing like more floral honey or something like that. The way that like, you know, bees in the real world, the flavor of their honey is affected by what type of flowers they have around. And obviously, like, you don't have stuff like flavor in Minecraft, but like, you know, maybe that leads to more potion ingredients or some other bits and pieces. Like there could be some fun to be had there. Either way, I think there's still potential for ideas like the Moo Bloom, but we're going to move on to Tim S's suggestion, which touches a little bit on the Rascal. Tim is a landscape artist member of our Discord as well. Thank you so much for the email, Tim. The subject being prospecting for ores. Hi, Pix and Joel. Your discussion about the Rascal in episode 358, specifically its potential to help find ores, reminded me of Vintage Story. I've been watching Gemini Tay's VODs, and one of the features she's used is a prospector's pick that can be used to triangulate ore deposits. I think some kind of prospecting tool or mob would be more fun than strip mining. It would also be safer for folks such as myself who don't enjoy getting snuck up on by mobs in large caverns. Would prospecting make the game too easy? How could players unlock the ability to prospect in Minecraft? Tim and his new best friend, the Rascal, ruined the economy. That's a little bit different to the usual death message. It's the death of the economy. Oh gosh.
I'm not familiar with Vintage Story. I did have to Google it before the show, and I thought it was a Minecraft mod, but it looks like it's its own game. It's very blocky. It's a voxel-based survival game that leans very heavily into the survival aspect of things, according to my very brief research. So as far as that going into Minecraft and looking for something for prospecting, I could see this as something like a potion. I could see this as maybe a new mob or new item that's added that then adds more gameplay to the brewing stand. And instead of night vision, maybe you get ore vision. We've already talked recently about enchanting, and I don't think another enchantment on a pick is the answer. I feel like the enchanting is already kind of bloated as it is. But getting a specific potion that lasts a finite amount of time, you know, it'll only allow you to see ores. And if you gate that behind something a little bit farther along, like maybe it's a nether mob. I don't know if end mob is pushing it too far down the line, but if you put it somewhere where it's not immediate, you still have to have the game experience of hunting and mining for ores on your own normally before you have the ability to craft this potion. So you'll value the ad it gives you because you had to do it the hard way the first time. And so I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up potions because Terraria has a feature like this called a Spelunker's Potion, where it highlights nearby ores through the terrain, but obviously with Terraria it's a 2D view, so you're looking at it from the side on. It's a side-scrolling game, and you can only see stuff that's immediately around you because of the viewpoint of the game. Whereas in Minecraft, it'd have to maybe work in a specific radius for it to really feel balanced, and even then it feels closer to things that players use to cheat on the server, like having an X-ray mod that sort of removes the textures or makes some blocks transparent so that you can see where diamond ores are and things like that. So I can imagine a feature like this actually being fairly controversial. I sort of wonder how it would be balanced, perhaps just by the radius in which you're digging. I also like the idea of it requiring a mob to help with that, so it's a little bit more of a symbiotic relationship. You have a rascal, you catch them and maybe like give them some food or an item that they want, and then they could maybe like point to a wall and say, hey, dig that way. But then you wouldn't necessarily get the exact location of the ores, so there's still a bit of gameplay, and it's just something that helps you solve the puzzle rather than just banging your head against the wall until you brute force your way into some sort of ores. So I think it'd need a lot of playtesting to really make it feel like it fit as an organic feature of mining, but I don't dislike the idea just on its own merits. I think it's kind of neat. The main difference, I think, between the Terraria approach and the Minecraft approach as well is that you need a lot more ore to create anything worthwhile in Terraria, whereas at this point in Survival Guide, if I go mining for diamonds, I just end up with more diamonds that I don't really have a whole lot to do with, besides eventually use them as building blocks, or maybe if I want to craft a lot of stuff with armor trims and I have to reproduce the smithing templates a whole bunch, perhaps. But yeah, I'm sort of curious, does it really help that much in late game when the chances are you've got all of the ores that you need to, and it's just about, finding the blocks that you want to build with, or various other bits and pieces? I think there's maybe some potential for it in modded context as well, if you have the rascal looking for ores that are, non-standard vanilla ores, and so naturally that kind of helps you out a lot more. But I'm kind of curious if that would have any long-term benefit, or maybe provide some minigame potential for late game, even if it's not something that you're going to necessarily benefit from as a survival player.
Yeah, I think it depends on the kind of stuff you're looking for. So, I mean, we can get redstone from witch farms. You can get iron from iron farms. Gold, nether gold farms and bartering and stuff like that. But also, like, I feel like trying to find gold in the overworld is a little bit tougher. Same with lapis. Maybe like the allay, you could give the rascal like a sample, like, hey, here's some redstone, could you point me to where have you seen this before?
Sure.
Show me where you could find more.
Yeah,
That could be interesting. Or geode, like geodes you kind of have to stumble upon, really, which is like, part of the fun. But if you wanted to find more after you found one, so again, you have to find one first, then take some amethyst and give it to a rascal, and then they will try to show you where the next one is. That could be kind of useful, I think. But I think it reminds me of emails we received in the past asking for additional gems or additional blocks or minerals in Minecraft that are not necessarily tied to the tech tree, but just tied to like decoration and cool stuff like amethyst, like building blocks. And if they did that, then that would be a cool way for, rather than like ore blocks specifically, if the rascal was like looking for gems, because they remind me of like the kind of treasure goblin you'd see in like a Diablo or another, action RPG game. Was it a treasure pig in Minecraft Dungeons, I think is what you had to go and chase?
I always called it the loot pig.
Yeah, that kind of stuff where like he's, if I remember correctly, he's sort of hunchback and sort of looks like he had maybe a sack on his back, or it was like a satchel on a stick or something. And that could be kind of cool, like to have like this little prospecting helper kind of point you towards these gems. Like that could be a fun way to separate that experience from mining for diamonds and ore and like metals and things.
I think the word rascal also kind of implies that there's a trickster element to them, and I'm sort of wondering what that could be. There's like, maybe there's a chance that they either like steal the ore from you and run away instead of helping you find more. Perhaps if there isn't any in the area for you to get, then maybe that's what they do, and then you maybe have to chase them down to claim it back off of them or something like that. I think there's an element to which it can be balanced a little bit more, rather than just helping players find ores, which mathematically speaking, they're going to find if they do enough digging. It's just about saving players time in the meantime.
Our next email comes from Thysania, a landscape artist of our community. Thanks again very much for supporting the show. Bringing the Vulture beyond the Badlands. Hi, Pix and Joel. The Vulture wasn't particularly well received as an idea in 2019 in the biome vote, partly due to misconceptions about its stealing loot, and partly because I don't think players saw much point in a death marker that only exists in a single biome. However, I think that if brought out of the Badlands, Vultures could actually be a really helpful gameplay mechanic. Vultures could spawn in after a player dies anywhere on the surface of the world, circling their items to provide an easy-to-see death marker and help guide players back to their items. I know a lot of players struggle to remember the exact location they died at, especially in forests or mountains, so the aerial indicator of circling vultures would be really beneficial. As a nice touch, vultures could have different skins depending on the biomes to reflect the wide variety of species of vultures and habitats they live in the real world. Thysonia died, but the vultures helped her get her items back.
Yeah, vultures are not one I've thought of for a while, because they were part of Badlands, and it was in the same biome vote as, I think, swamps and also deserts, or something like along those lines. So yeah, deserts never got the meerkats that were proposed for them either, although I think cactus flowers are now part of the game, so I think that might have been part of the original kind of offering there. I like the idea of flying passive mobs without there being a focus on production, because I think the issues with bees is that they're such a useful mob in terms of producing honey and honeycombs obviously, has knock-on implications for stuff like copper, so a lot of people need that around, but then bees are kind of difficult to contain in a specific area, or at least you've got to build a big box to hold them in, rather than having them just sort of fly off into unloaded chunks and disappear. So I like the idea of there being a mob that has a little bit more freedom to fly around, maybe gets involved if certain things happen, like if a player dies, but you're not reliant on the vultures to produce any drops for you or anything like that. Like it feels like a different part of Minecraft's ecosystem if we're not just expecting every new mob to provide a resource for us. And so I sort of like that as an idea in principle.
Yeah, I think that flying mobs are definitely needed. Any kind of motion that you add to the game just adds a lot. It's one of the reasons why I made the bee farm in Westall, is because it just adds some motion to the countryside. And to your point about containing them, there's instances in the Westall River Inn where I used beehives as part of the decor inside the inn, and bees can fit through the windows that are just trapdoors. And there's a single beehive in the house farm next door, and the inn is just close enough that the bee has filled up its own beehive and realized there's beehives within my search radius. So now the reception desk and I think one of the cupboards in the kitchen drip with honey because the bee has pollinated and then made honey in these other nests because they were close by. So it is hard to contain them in a more natural environment without, like you said, putting a big glass dome over where they can go. I like the idea of the vultures circling like a death marker. Like, I think that's really helpful. I certainly remember early on in Minecraft dying and having a hard time finding stuff, especially now when you've got these deep cave systems that you can wind and get lost in. And if you had the X and Z coordinates with the vultures circling overhead, but you still then had to dig down to find out where you were, it would be a much easier way to find stuff if you had lost something in a cave fight. But I don't find vultures that appealing. I think that's one of the things that Minecraft and Mojang probably had discovered as well, is that I don't think the broad audience really finds vultures very appealing either. They're, whether it's from pop culture or just the nature of the bird, they're not exactly a pleasant bird in terms of when you look at what they do for a living. And I thought, you could do the same thing with another animal. Why not use something more mystical like an owl? And instead of circling around your death as like a vulture would do, the owl may be circling around your items as a helpful animal companion might. And I think that could be really fun. And for me, when I think about a vulture being added to Minecraft in this context, I can't think of another use for them. But if an owl was added to Minecraft, while I don't have a lot of ideas off the top of my head right now, I could see there being other things an owl could be used for. Like, sure, if you die, there might be an owl to point you towards your loot. But if owls were in the game in general, I could see them being used for other things, like a pet, similar to a parrot. Maybe they can alert you when there's mobs around. Like, there's a bunch of different things that I think you could do. And I think Harry Potter fans would be ecstatic to have an owl pet in Minecraft. So, to the point in the email, the different varieties of vultures, there's lots of different varieties of owls, right? So you could have, a snowy owl showing you your items in an ice biome, or you could have a great horned owl showing your items in a taiga forest. Like there could be different ways to get different owls. It could be quite fun.
Yeah, like there's definitely a lot of variety to both owls and vultures, but I agree vultures feel a little morbid. And yeah, they don't have the greatest reputation. I think also recently, whenever they've been adding animals from the real world, a lot of the time Mojang are looking at, are there any environmental causes that we need to draw attention to? Like, are vultures endangered versus owls? Like, is there a reason that, one or the other makes sense to draw attention to as, something that players could learn something valuable about, and conservation, comes into question, and that kind of thing. So that might factor into their decision making as well. But I think the problem with using them as a death marker is we already have stuff like the recovery compass. And the sort of mechanical ways that works out. And while I agree that the recovery compass doesn't necessarily feel all that great to follow, especially if you're like looking down at it in your hand instead of looking at the environment around you, and having a signal of sorts in the sky for where you died makes a good deal of sense, similar to waypoint markers that you find in certain minimap mods that will highlight where you've died and that kind of thing. There's like precedent enough for it, I think. I think finding the spot you died in a cave from there in ways that don't just mean you dig straight down could be a little trickier. But then, yeah, I think seeing a marker of sorts in the sky does sort of make sense. Then again, the reason people aren't so hot on the recovery compass is because it's of absolutely no help to hardcore players, and it's just sort of a feature that doesn't do a whole lot else, especially when there's an item involved in crafting it that doesn't do anything other than make the recovery compass. So I think that might get a little pushback from players who enjoy playing hardcore, and then there's a mob in the game that they just never get to see because they can't do anything with their worlds after they die. And so maybe if you go into spectator mode, you could see the vultures circling your death point, or the owls sort of leading to it, or whatever. But I feel like it seems strange to add in something that is so, I guess, like out of the wheelhouse of, or like, doesn't even cross into the gameplay of one of Minecraft's more popular playstyles currently. I mean, they've only just added hardcore mode to Bedrock editions, so I feel like it makes sense to implement features that support all forms of play these days. Moving on to our final email for this episode that comes from Parabolic Ninja with a crab idea. Hi, Johnny and Joel. Greatly enjoy the show and your perspectives on all the various ways to play. I also appreciate your ability to consider all sides of the ideas offered by listeners. Well, I hope you've done a good job of that so far. I was listening to an episode of the show a while back where you were talking about possibilities for the crab claw and the frustration with chopping down mangrove trees. I had an idea that perhaps a live crab could be enticed to hit some part of the mangrove tree and thus shake some of the leaves off the tree. Perhaps it would require 3 hits to shake all the leaves off the tree, but it seems to me that it might be a possible way to add an interesting twist to chopping mangrove trees. Maybe you guys have some ideas for how to entice the crab to work for you. Perhaps you feed the crab something, it goes into a frenzy, and runs around crashing into trees. Or maybe it climbs the trees and eats the leaves off the tree. Breed up a horde of crabs and you can strip a forest of leaves in moments. It seems likely that it would need to work for all trees, but maybe in this case it only works on mangrove trees. As a Bedrock player, TNT tree farms aren't really a thing. Pistons can be used to create blocks of wood to harvest, but it still requires that I swing an axe. I'd be in favour of a sort of natural tree farm. It appears that there is actually such a thing as a mangrove crab, and they actually eat dead leaves, and occasionally even eat fresh mangrove leaves. Thanks, Wikipedia. Thanks for the show. Parabolic Ninja was chased out of the swamp by a horde of crabs.
At first I was thinking that this was going to be the player fittingly punching a tree with a crab claw. Just kind of like an upgrade to your first moments in Minecraft of punching a tree. And then shaking the leaves off of a tree. But I think the crabs doing it is a fun idea as well. Specifically, you just mentioned earlier today that having a mob involved in something as a symbiotic relationship, as opposed to killing the crab for its claw and then using the claw to do your own stuff later on, is more interesting to have like a behavior of a animal that you have to work with as opposed to harvest. And I like that idea. You'd obviously want to control it. Like you wouldn't want crabs just loosely deciding which trees they want to smash and knock the leaves off of, because you'd have vast swaths of mangrove swamp with bald trees for no reason, depending on how long you've had them loaded. So that could be interesting to control. I'm not sure what you would do in those cases to kind of encourage the crabs to fight or to eat the leaves on the trees. I do like the idea of expanding that to beyond mangrove, because there are a couple of other trees in the game that are kind of a pain in the butt. Acacia, large oak trees can be hard to get all the wood out of. Obviously mangrove. So it'd be fun to use that on other trees. I don't know if it feels kind of overpowered to like shake all of the leaves off of a tree. I really like the idea in terms of how easy it would be to harvest mangrove, but I feel like in Minecraft we're very much stuck in this one block at a time phase, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So I don't know what you could do with the crab to help this and facilitate this without crossing that line into like shaking all of the leaves off a tree. Feels like very much more than one block at a time, right?
Yeah, and it also feels like mobs breaking blocks, which is not something that happens very frequently. Like, creepers
Yeah.
and ghasts and so forth can grief them, but that feels like a different thing. I
Yeah.
do, however, like the idea that the player is facilitating that by feeding the crab something first. So it requires an interaction. It feels like more of a player behavior that's triggered by the player rather than mob griefing. And if it happened only to naturally spawned leaves as opposed to player-placed leaves, then you get rid of this possibility of it being used to grief really cool custom tree builds, for example. So, yeah, plenty of options there. I do like the idea of a crab working that way, and it certainly gives some ideas for the crab claw either being used as sort of an upgraded set of shears, because shears don't currently have any material upgrades. They're made of iron, but they don't have a diamond shears or anything like that. And I use a silk touch hoe to break most of the blocks shears can gather, but there are still exceptions to that, like shearing sheep and collecting cobwebs and that kind of thing. But I like the idea as well of the player being able to obtain this crab claw and use it to knock on a tree with, and then maybe that allows the player to trigger that themselves without the need to wait for the crab to do it or constantly kind of feed the crab to trigger this behavior. You could even modify that slightly. In Stardew Valley, if you walk up to a tree and right-click it without trying to chop it down with any kind of tool, sometimes it will drop the seed that lets you replant that tree. So it'll drop a pine cone or an acorn or something like that. I like the idea of knocking on the trunk of a tree with a crab claw, and that gets you saplings without having to break the leaves to obtain the saplings.
Right.
So that could be really useful for stuff like Skyblock, where occasionally players are left with just one tree, and if that tree doesn't give them the sort of RNG chance of dropping a sapling, they just can't regrow it, and there you go, no more wood, Skyblock playthrough over. So I think there's maybe some element of that could be useful in other facets of gameplay. So it's not necessarily just the block breaking idea that's part of it. Like you could have other functionality tied into that as well. It just becomes a tool with which to interact with a tree in a way that you don't already have, and probably isn't something you need often enough that it becomes something you have to permanently have on a slot in your hotbar, which I think is a lot of the difficulty with adding new tools right now, as players push back against that because their hotbar is already full of the pre-existing tools that they need to break blocks everywhere else.
Yeah, when I think about a crab claw that the player uses to punch a tree or shake a tree or, like you said, get something out of a tree, it does sort of line up with the original concept of it, which was to increase the reach of the player. Like if you had the crab claw, then you could mine blocks farther away. Well, the biggest pain about these trees is that you have to climb up and jump through hoops to get all the leaves at the top. And so by using a crab claw to quote unquote shake them, you're essentially getting a farther reach for what you want than you originally had. So it sort of lines up with that original idea. For me, I'm with the camp of I don't want another tool. Like I don't want yet another thing that's going to clog up my inventory. I don't even really use hoes on leaf blocks. Like I have shears because they're easy to craft. I use them for other things. I'm going to need them when I'm landscaping for cutting down ferns and grass and stuff like that anyway. So I just use shears on leaf blocks, and yeah, they don't last as long, and they don't have you can't necessarily get mending or well, you could put mending on them, but like you can't get silk touch on them. But I have silk touch on my pickaxe, so if I'm trying to like harvest some leaves, if I need a lot of them, I'll use a hoe. But if I just need like a half dozen leaves from a tree that I'm chopping down, I just use my silk touch axe to get the leaves, right? So
Yeah.
it's I don't feel like an extra item for me would be where it's at. However, I could see the crab claw and potentially other things as a gateway into a pie in the sky idea for trinkets in Minecraft, where you get an extra slot in your inventory and you add something in there that's going to change the way that you are currently playing the game. You probably can only have one at a time, which would make sense. So maybe a crab claw will help you shear or chop wood faster, or something that will just enable and facilitate the speed to harvesting mangrove trees, that kind of thing. Maybe, like I mentioned earlier, owls. What if an owl feather shows you mobs? We were talking about a potion vision for showing you ores. What if you had an owl feather and at nighttime you could then see outlines of mobs in the darkness to help you avoid them? Like, there's little things like that could be really fun to mess with. And again, kind of include like a symbiotic relationship between mobs, the things they might drop. I think if I remember correctly, in the original pitch for the crab, you didn't have to kill it to get the claw. It just shed it naturally. You just had to be around long enough to grab it.
Yeah.
And they could do the same thing if with like an owl feather. Like maybe you just have to be around the owl long enough before it drops a feather, just randomly, that kind of stuff. Or maybe you give it something, and then like if you feed it, then it would drop a feather for you, that kind of thing, and almost like a bartering system. But I like the idea of the crab claw as something that, if I have to carry it around or if it's going to be used, I'd like it to be something that would not add to inventory clutter. Because that's why I don't carry a hoe and shears with me, is because the shears do the same thing as the hoe and more. So I use the more versatile tool.
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, I think the notion of them helping you with mangrove, I think, is a good one, just because I know a lot of players have been resistant to building with mangrove because of how much of a pain it is to chop. I feel like maybe a crab claw, if used this way, could extend to all trees, because it feels weird for it to only have functionality for one type. And the thing I thought was, frankly, I need the most help with netherwort and warped wart blocks, because those are the only sort of leaf analog blocks which don't decay naturally when you chop down the trunk. And so you have to use a hoe for those to break them, and I usually just end up composting them for more bone meal, because you need bone meal to grow them from the nylium in the first place. But I think if a crab were to just sort of walk around occasionally munching on netherwort, it could be kind of like the interaction between frogs and magma cubes, where you're introducing something from the overworld to something from the nether that turns out to be like a food that has some sort of interaction for it. And maybe the crabs process that into something else. Who knows? Like, I think there's maybe some options for a bit of interesting ecosystem versatility there. But I do like the idea of the crab. I think it seems like quite a fun mob to have around. It's unlike a lot of the life that we have in Minecraft already. I think it'd be sort of closest to the armadillo, maybe, especially since you mentioned the fact that they sort of occasionally drop a crab claw naturally if you hang around them for long enough, similar to how armadillos can be brushed for scutes, but they will just sort of drop one every so often as well. So yeah, I think there's room for stuff like the crab. And in fact, all of the ideas we've had this week have been really interesting, very diverse, and a little off the beaten path when it comes to suggestions for each of these mobs. So really want to extend a thank you to the folks who emailed in to the show and gave us some new fresh ideas for all of these mobs that we've been talking about for a while now. We've been talking on this show for a while now, in fact, so that's probably time to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that, as Joel mentioned at the top of the show, at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, where there's always lively discussion happening about Minecraft in its various forms. You can also listen into the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday. We have monthly hangouts with our patrons, the next of which is coming up the same day as Minecraft Live, so we'll be talking to our patrons on the 27th before we end up co-streaming Minecraft Live and finding out what all of the new stuff is happening. We currently have 274 patrons, which is up 3 from last week. Thank you to the 3 of you for jumping on board. There is always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons who help make this show possible: Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on Spotify and YouTube in video format and across your favorite podcasting apps. You can, of course, email us at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by PixelRiffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/PixelRiffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its third season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube stuff, and I've just started playing Hollow Knight. Now that the sequel Silk Song is out, I thought I'd figure out what that game is all about. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which will be taking a break after they finish Season 10, but in the meantime, you can find us through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at PixelRiffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
You can listen to my other podcast, The Citadel Cafe. It's all about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. You can also find me on Twitch at Joel Duggan. I stream Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. and on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Right now, we're back in Satisfactory, so that's probably what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I do, of course, play Minecraft. We're working on some new things there. And I will let everyone know that there may be a delay in the Friday LEGO Let's Chat as I'm replacing the Soundwave set. But it is coming back, so look for that upcoming on twitch.tv/Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and your vote still counts.